The Master Tavern Keeper's History of the Old World. The smallest spark of doubt can ignite the biggest fire of fear.
Oh, so what do you mean? What kind of dead did the two Slayers see? The living dead, or the actual dead? The proper dead, I mean.
It was the latter, at least initially. Strolvarr, though, told it all far better than I can. The port of Skeggy, 1553.
Once it, Snorri and I peered down. Below us, we could see the main trail through Peak Pass. But not only that, there was a clearing, all but hidden from the view of those who travel upon the trail. It was this clearing that drew our eye. There was an encampment there. An encampment surrounded by dead bodies. Piles of smouldering skeletons and gnawed cadavers. Between these were small hillocks of smashed up caravans and wagons. Adjacent were walled off, fortified and guarded areas filled with stolen goods and booty. Off to the rear there were the pens and cages of captured travellers and merchants, as well as cooking fires, over which some of the prisoners were being roasted and eaten alive.
By Namrud's lips, what devilry was afoot? Whose camp was this?
A manling camp. Creatures that had become tainted beyond all recognition by both the curse of Nagash and by more than a touch of insanity. A camp of ghouls.
Peak Pass, 1472.
Look, Beardlin, do you see? Eaters of the dead. Corrupted Umgi. Looks like they've been preying on merchants, traders and travellers as they enter Peak Pass, judging by all the debris all about. How can they be here? Don't our garrisons line the pass, guarding it from such? Aye, the brave dwarves of Karakadrin guard the pass and fell the forces of darkness. Be they the scions of the dark pantheon, devotees of destruction, or the gibbering followers of Nagash. What are you implying, Beardlin? That we are neglectful in our duty? It is quite the opposite. Why do you think this enclave of Nagashian nightmare fodder is all the way out here on the eastern slopes of the pass? It is to be as far away from we slayers as possible, just like in the old rhyme. Hands clenched, tight palm pommel, hidden out of sight. A drawn knife now bloody in the depths of black-clad night, seeking the weakest threads to cut without forewarning or fair fight, yet fearful of the day of steely retribution's axe bite. But dear beardling. It seems that some cadron still has still found these skulkers in the dark, and it thirsts for their foul blood. Will you join me in wielding some steely retribution? And Manlin, of course, I did. We made our way down the steep slope adjacent to the cliff's edge and clambered down it. It was slow going, nearly vertical at times, and we constantly had to use the nearby trunks of the trees to prevent us toppling over on the soft, springy, leaf-littered ground and tumbling down the slope. We made good time, though. That was until the smells came and stopped us in our tracks. First came wisps of the newly dead, carried on the wind, that bitter, citrus, tallow-like odor. These mixed with the smells of fire and burning fat. As we descended lower, they gave way to the more familiar smell of bloating, gaseous corpses, feces, urine, vomit, and the tang of garlic. Snorri and I exchanged glances, but he simply shook his head and continued his descent. I followed. The further we went, the stronger the stench got, before finally shifting towards a stink of the most pungent chemicals, like those that you find in the workshops of dwarf engineers, mixed with the odor of cut grass and boiled cabbage. By the time we reached the bottom, the floor of the pass itself, it was nearly dusk, and the early evening light made the woodland feel stifling, and, coupled with the smells of the camp, nauseating. At that moment, as we caught our breath in the trees near the camp, we saw a tall figure step out of the large central hut that had been made out of the broken wagons and ripped-up tents the ghouls had salvaged. He was dressed in a long, black, ragged robe, and his face hidden by a black hood. Yet he exuded the poise of someone with power. At his appearance, some ghouls lit up numerous fires around the camp before joining the growing throng that were gathering around the dark figure. Wails and screams suddenly came from the cages and prisoner pens on the far side of the camp from us. We could almost taste their fear and terror. The figure in black raised up his arms. A hush fell upon the assembled cannibals, and he spoke.
Hearken! Hearken to my words. It is a cold, strange world, my children. A hungry, sad world. A world full of miseries, woes, and troubles. And yet when I, King Laf, come, I make them all dance to the tune I play. And we can feast and be merry. Bleeding bodies, and marrowful bones, and tears that burn as they fall, are all condiments to our feast. Bring the prisoners and let us dance and eat, my children. Dance to the music that I make with this smileless mouth of mine, and dine upon the weak we have captured. For I cannot be merry until all your bellies are full, and King Laugh cannot laugh, and hunt, and indulge in that wild joy until our pens and cages have been emptied. Guards, bring forth the meat!
There was a flurry of activity as drums began to pound, and a horde of ghouls ran off towards the prisoners, drool trailing from their mouths as they did so. I think I've seen enough, Beardlin. Let's end this. I nodded, and we stood, letting our belongings hit the ground, and brandishing our weapons. Me, my trusty great axe, and Snorri, his 2 hand axes. Retribution has found your corpse eaters! And in this way, we ran into the morass of crypt scavengers, our blades threshing, slicing and hacking every heartbeat, seeing the dead pile up about us. We moved towards the Cabal leader like a crossbow bolt towards a bullseye. Quick, direct, and deadly. And at last, he saw us, and immediately began waving his hands around like some crazed court jester. Snorri suddenly turned to me. He's going to bring the dead back to unlife. We'll be swamped. On my back, Beardlin, and throw that thing. I know you want to. And with that, Snorri threw himself into the mass of ghouls ahead of us, cutting down a wide swathe of them as he fell to his knees. I immediately jumped onto his back and threw my great axe at the necromancer. It spun over and over, arcing over and over, coursing through the air in long moments before finally, inevitably, crashing into the black-robed sorcerer with a thumping thud, sending him flying back to land in a heap in front of one of the bonfires. Everything and everyone suddenly stopped to look at the fallen King Laugh. He didn't move. The still living ghouls slowly started to move away from us, wary and unsure. I remember thinking ourselves safe until I saw the dead ghouls about us beginning to twitch and move. Snorri stood, passing me one of his hand axes. I'm sorry, Grumbaki. This looks like the end. I meant to get you back to Karakadrin. Of course, I welcome my doom, my death, but you've things to do. If the chance comes, promise me you'll get away to die another day. Do not deny my request. Let us not end with bad blood between us, Beardlin. I nodded. How could I not? The undead were now beginning to rise, and so too did King Laugh. The necromancer staggered unsteadily to his feet, my axe still embedded in him. He then raised a gnarled finger and pointed at us. The living ghouls rallied and wearily began to move in our direction, their poisonous claws outstretched and eager. We stood and waited. Then, suddenly, the flames behind the necromancer flared up, and something stirred in the bonfire. It appeared that the dark magic of the necromancer had not only awoken the dead ghouls, as a tall, burning figure emerged from the conflagration. We recognized it. It was the scorched man we'd seen at our campsite. He lunged out at the roaring flames, grabbed the black-clad magic user, and dragged him back into the searing fire, burying them both in its white-hot, burning embers. With his dying scream, the undead suddenly dropped to the ground, motionless and lifeless. The living ghouls, too, stopped. Snorri glanced at me. Kill them all! And we did.
By Sigmar's crown, what a tale, Strolvarr. But what happened to the prisoners? And your axe?
As you can see, my axe is fine. Takes more than a fire to damage a dwarf axe. As to the prisoners, we freed them. Tended to their wounds as best we could, before accompanying them back to Karak-Kadrin, guarding them lest tragedy once more come a-knockin'. They arrived safely. There was one last twist in this tale, though.
Peak Pass, 1472.
The night before we returned to the hold, We made camp just below the snow line of one of the nearby slopes. The survivors were too exhausted to reach Carrick Cadlin before nightfall. The snows had started. We made numerous fires for everyone before finally sitting down to rest our weary bones. I remember sitting by the fire. Snorri had gone off to relieve himself. I was looking at the ragdoll I'd found buried where we'd first seen the scorched man. I thought perhaps I might throw it in the fire. Suddenly, a child's hand reached down and took it. I was too surprised to resist. When I looked up to see who it was, I found that I was alone. No child, no doll, no one else nearby at all. But it felt as if a weight had been lifted from me. But fate gives as easily as it takes, and the reprieve was brief, for trouble came again upon our arrival at Carrick Cadrin.